All right, let's jump right into this. You know, when we think about the history of modern science, there's this really standard narrative we've all been taught. It goes kind of like this. The brilliant ancient Greeks laid the groundwork, and then, well, after a massive, centuries-long pause, European minds sparked the Renaissance, and boom, they built the modern world. But the historical analysis we're diving into in today's explainer argues that this narrative has a glaring 500-year hole right in the middle of it. Today we're looking at how an absolutely vital era of scientific discovery was effectively erased and how uncovering this missing link totally rewrites the history of global innovation.
So that myth we just talked about, it suggests this clean, direct jump from ancient Greece straight to the European Renaissance. But the reality presented by our source material points to a 500-year Islamic bridge. And this wasn't just some historical waiting room where ancient knowledge sat around collecting dust. Not at all. It was this incredibly dynamic era where scholars preserved, critiqued, and vastly expanded on Greek knowledge. It was literally the intellectual spark that ignited the Renaissance. The source argues this bridge was absolutely essential to modern science, yet it's been systematically scrubbed from our mainstream history.
Section 1. Pioneers of the Golden Age, unveiling the true innovators.
To really grasp the scale of what's been left out, we have to look at some of these forgotten pioneers. Take aviation, for example. For generations, the Wright brothers have been universally celebrated as the undisputed inventors of flight, right? Well, our source highlights a historical claim that totally flips that script. Long before Kitty Hawk, a Muslim scientist named Abbas ibn Firnas actually took the world's first flight. It is a perfect example of how our collective historical memory just kind of skips over these monumental achievements that happened way before the 20th century.
I mean, think about the 8th and 9th centuries. While a lot of Europe was slogging through what we often call the Dark Ages, Baghdad was essentially the intellectual capital of the world. We're talking foundational, world-changing stuff here. You had Jabir ibn Hayyan mapping out the basics of modern chemistry through distillation, Al-Khwarizmi literally writing the book that gave us formal algebra, and yes, we're going to get back to his name later. They were laying the exact groundwork for optics and experimental science. And it wasn't just abstract math. The Bimidistan was the world's first large-scale, state-funded hospital system. They essentially invented free healthcare. Plus, they had places like the Al-Shamsiyya Observatory actively mapping out the stars and discovering new celestial bodies.
Okay, I want you to let this number sink in for a second. 99%. That represents the sheer precision of these scholars. Specifically, a scientist named Al-Biruni calculated the exact size of the Earth with 99% accuracy. Think about that. This wasn't some lucky guess. This was a rigorous, methodical, scientific observation happening hundreds of years before the telescope was even a thing.
And then consider this number, 16. The mathematician Jamshid al-Kashi calculated pi to 16 decimal places. That was an accuracy record that went completely unmatched for the next 180 years. And right around that same time, al-Battani was developing the exact trigonometry. You know, the sines, cosines, and tangents that high schoolers are still sweating over today. He initially designed it to help determine the direction of prayer, the Qibla, but the mathematical foundations were just rock solid.
Section 2. The Fall of Baghdad, a devastating rupture.
So, if this civilization was firing on all cylinders like that, what exactly happened? Well, one historical account captures what is arguably one of the darkest days in human intellectual history. In 1258, the Mongol invasion, led by Hulagu Khan, reached Baghdad. And this wasn't just a military defeat, it was a total psychological and cultural devastation. The legendary House of Wisdom was burned to the ground. Centuries of irreplaceable manuscripts, medical discoveries, astronomical observations, all of it thrown straight into the Tigris River. The tradition actually says the river ran black with the ink of destroyed books. It's just a staggering loss to even think about.
But the source impartially points out something really important here. The decline wasn't just the fault of external invaders. The political structures were already rotting from the inside due to corruption and sectarian divisions. And perhaps the biggest blow was intellectual stagnation. See, where questioning and research used to be viewed as a literal form of worship, dynamic inquiry was slowly replaced by blind imitation. Rote learning took over. The whole ecosystem of innovation was fracturing from the inside out long before the Mongols ever showed up.
Section 3. Reshaping Identity, the Translation Movement.
All right, so Baghdad fell, but here is the wild part. The knowledge itself actually found an escape route, even before the flames hit Baghdad, and over in places like Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus. A massive transfer of knowledge was already happening. During the 12th and 13th centuries, in cities like Toledo and regions like Sicily, there were these huge translation movements taking Arabic manuscripts and translating them directly into Latin. This is how the knowledge survived. European centers of learning, like the brand new universities of Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, they literally built their core university syllabi entirely around these translated Arabic texts.
But here is the crucial catch, and it's all about how we remember these scholars today. To make these texts fit into European grammar and accents, a process called the Latinization of names occurred, and it fundamentally reshaped their identities. Ibn Sina became Avicenna, Ibn Rushd became Averroes, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi became Algorithmi, which by the way is exactly where we get the word algorithm, and Jabir ibn Hayyan became Geber. By stripping away their original names and their civilizational context, these scholars were completely rebranded. It effectively tricked future generations into assuming these brilliant minds were just part of some Western or Greek school of thought, completely disguising their Islamic origins. Section 4. The transfer of credit, rewriting the history books.
And this name change, it wasn't an isolated thing. It was just one piece of a much broader process of systemic historical erasure. The source identifies 4 specific steps that allowed Europe to claim intellectual ownership of modern science. First, translating the texts into Latin. Second, Latinizing the names to mask their origins. Third, the compression of history. And fourth, the complete transfer of scientific credit away from the Islamic Bridge and directly over to Western institutions. Let's actually zoom in on that third step for a second.
So, what is the compression of history? It's basically rewriting the historical narrative to draw a straight, unbroken line from ancient Greece directly to the European Renaissance. That entire 500-year intermediate period was just quietly scrubbed from textbooks. The foundational Muslim scholars were downgraded to secondary roles. They were framed as merely translators rather than the originators they actually were. For example, while Aristotle stayed central to European philosophy, the crucial commentaries by Ibn Rushd, the guy they renamed Averroes, were deliberately minimized, even though his work provided the exact logical framework that truly fueled the Renaissance.
Yet despite this massive transfer of credit, the undeniable truth was still sitting right there in the classrooms. Ibn Sina's original Arabic text became the canon of medicine in Latin, and that single book acted as the absolute bedrock of European medical education for 600 years. It's a profound irony, really. The Renaissance was heavily fueled by Islamic texts, even while the history books were being actively rewritten to hide that exact fact.
Section 5. Reclaiming the legacy, a call to action.
Now, the source shifts from history to a pretty sobering modern-day analysis. What does this rewritten history mean for the world right now? The author poses a tough question. Where does the Muslim world stand in today's scientific landscape? Impartially speaking, the source notes a very conspicuous absence. If you look at top-tier global research universities, or Nobel Prize winners in the sciences, or the buzzing high-tech innovation hubs in Silicon Valley or Tokyo, modern Muslim nations are largely missing from the forefront.
Why is that? Well, the source identifies a few systemic root causes behind this decline. Some are external, things like the lasting impacts of colonial occupations and severe political instability. But crucially, just like the fall of Baghdad, a lot of the issues are internal. There's been a really detrimental shift away from a culture that values rigorous research, replacing it with a system that just prioritizes rote learning and degree chasing. And without a supportive ecosystem at home, these nations suffer from a massive brain drain, where their absolute best and brightest leave to go work for institutions abroad.
But it's not all doom and gloom. The source actually outlines a clear path forward. Because let's face it, taking pride in a golden past is kind of meaningless if you aren't backing it up with action today. The proposed steps are straightforward. Heavily fund actual research labs. Return to a culture that actively promotes open debate and critical thinking. View scientific progress as a human necessity rather than a threat to tradition. And above all, you have to truly value and retain brilliant minds at home.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. The foundation of modern science was undeniably built across a 500-year Islamic bridge, a legacy of just fierce curiosity and boundless innovation. So the question the source leaves us with is this: will this extraordinary legacy serve as the catalyst to reclaim a culture of critical thinking and research today? Or will it remain nothing more than a faded memory, lost in the altered pages of history books? It is a fascinating look at how history gets written, and more importantly, how it shapes our future.